Assalamu alaikum, guys. This is Dr. Nida Masroor. Today we are going to discuss the rest of what we have started earlier. That is understanding and defining research methodology. That is part 2 of the previous lecture. So, in the last lecture, we have discussed so far that how are we going to identify the research problem? What is the objective of research, conducting research, keeping in mind the cost benefit analysis, how the topic of research can be identified, what are the researchable topics that should be considered. And meanwhile, we also have discussed the types of different types of researches and the methodology that can be devised as per the nature of research, how we are going to devise that thing, and the effect of that thing on whole of your methodology, the nature of your topic, the nature of your research. So far we have discussed different types of research, including qualitative, quantitative, and many others. And we also have discussed the qualitative research methods and quantitative research methods. We also have discussed a research process that starts from the identification of problem or opportunity, and then we moving on towards the formulation of concepts and propositions, statement of hypothesis, how the statements are created, what are hypothesis, what is actually hypothesis, and how these statements are created. And then comes the research method, design of research methodology, appropriate methodology. We have discussed in the last lecture that keep this thing in mind, that every topic has its own set of methodology that is appropriate to it. It's not like that any kind of methodology, any methodology can be applied to any kind of research. No, the right set of components is what that makes the research a successful project, and also eliminate the chances of errors, that is type 1 error or type 2 error. We also have gone through those things, that what are different kind of errors that can occur as a result of wrong methodology applied to the research topic. And what is wrong methodology? That is the selection of wrong population, or selecting the wrong method of sampling method or sampling size, or there are many other things that can obviously just falsify, or that can totally like make your research useless for policy making, with having the false results as well. So moving on towards the rest of slides, that is hypothesis. We have discussed in the last lecture that hypothesis is a tentative statement. We have to keep in mind that is a declarative statement that has to be made very clearly, a clear, assertive statement that declares your intention, that declares or explain a possible relationship between different variables that is subject to testing and verification. Hypothesis is a testable prediction that seeks to explain a phenomena or make a statement about the relationship between variables. What are variables? The dependent or independent one, the components where we are going to where we are going to understand the relationship between two different factors, between two different components. It is formulated based on prior knowledge, observation, or theories. Hypotheses are of different kinds. That is null hypothesis. It can be alternative. One of the hypotheses is the actual one. That is a statement that clearly defines the relationship between two different variables. Alternative hypothesis is the opposite of that one. The alternative hypothesis is a statement that proposes specific relationship or effect challenging the null hypothesis. And what is null hypothesis? that suggests no significant relationship or effect between variables. An alternative hypothesis is the one that declares the relationship between the two variables. On the screen, you can also see different kind of research framework. The picture also depicts different kind of variables as well. That is independent variable, the dependent variable, moderator, and mediator. First of all, we need to understand what is dependent variable and what is independent variable. Dependent variable is that particular variable that contains that particular component or factor that is affected by another one, which is considered as the independent variable. Variables are basically empty slots, empty boxes that contains different values or different factors. It can either be, if you are going to study the relationship between poverty and education, the poverty and crime rate, and or like kind of uh, economic purchasing power and education, or purchasing power and market share, or anything like that. It's very much important what we are going to study and what particular relation are we going to study, like the effect of one variable on another. For example, we have a law of demand in economics that states law of demand in economics that states that with the increase in price, demand decreases, and with the decrease in price, demand increases. Now, in this particular scenario, uh, it should be noted that we are understanding the relation, we are understanding the effect of price on demand. Price is the independent variable and demand is the dependent one. If the relationship is reversed, if the phenomena is reversed, obviously the whole situation will be totally changed. The price, if increased price decreases, result in decrease in demand. But in case if we are having a totally reverse result, uh, with the increase in demand, price never decreases. Price also increases because of branding, increased market share, increased demand. So that obviously reversing the situation will give you different kind of results. This thing is very much important. So independent variable is the one whom effect we are going to study on. The dependent one is that particular variable which is subject to change with the change in independent one. And the other variables, the mediator one, mediating variables are those variables that in the picture you can see the independent variable A has an effect on a mediating variable, and a mediating variable has an effect on a dependent variable. So we can safely assume that the relationship between independent variable and dependent variable exists. For example, like if we have A is the independent variable and B is the mediator and C is the dependent one. So if we can say that A has an effect on B and B has an effect on C, so we can also say that A has an effect on C. So that is what a mediating variable all about. That helps you understand the relationship or build relationship between different variables, right? Now, in case of moderator, moderator is that kind of phenomena that contains values like they have either of two values, like either yes or no kind of Boolean variables. Uh, that contains either yes or no kind of variables or present or non-present kind of variables. With it, that also help you understand the phenomena in that in case if you have the presence of certain variable, in that case, the variable, independent variable has different kind of effect on dependent one. But in the absence of the moderating variable, or in the reverse situation of alternative selection of moderating variable, the independent variable might show different kind of effect on dependent variable. For example, like if I want to study the effect of purchasing power on, or high economic index on higher education, and the area where I'm going to, the sampling frame where I'm going to study this particular phenomena does not contain any kind of universities or higher education institutions. So in that case, the moderating variable help you understand. Obviously, in that case, the whole relationship will be totally failure. The results will not depict the true picture, because despite the high purchasing power, high economic conditions, in absence of higher education institutions, the literacy rate or higher education literacy will be low. So moderating variables are those kind of variables that helps you better explain the phenomena, and that also completely changes at times the outcomes of different relationships. Another thing, as we have discussed earlier, that we are right now in the phase of defining the research methodology. And research methodology, the most important component of research methodology is the data, availability of data. So the data, sources of data, there are two kind of sources. One of them is the primary data and the other one is the secondary data. Secondary data is that particular kind of data that is one thing, it's published, and that is actually gathered for some other research that is not specific to your own research. That is mostly in the published form, that is mostly available in different institutions. It can, but the main concept is that that particular data is not primarily gathered for the whole sole purpose of your research. Secondary data either was gathered for general purposes or either was gathered for some other kind of research. So that is the secondary data. The sources of that particular data includes library, books, government institutions, business journals, research journals, and like statistical bulletins, and all those all that particular information that is in the printed form, published form prior to your research, that is included in secondary data. Whereas in case of primary data is that particular that is also considered the first-hand data that is primarily and gathered for your research and specifically designed. The questions, the nature of gathering that particular data, all those components are primarily designed according to your requirements, according to the nature of research which you are conducting right now. That includes the surveys, in-person, telephone, mails, observation studies, and focus groups as well, and experimental techniques, including laboratory experiments and field experiments. There are many others. With the obviously with the growing impact of research, with the growing demand of research in every field of life, in every aspect of life, uh, more and more more and more innovative ways and contemporary ways of conducting research are introduced these days. Next, another thing, as we have discussed, this one is the sources of data. We have to please clearly distinguish these things. Sources of data is something else, and types of data is something else. One thing we need to understand, the types of data, as we have discussed earlier, there are different kinds of research. The main thing is the basis of categorization. And with the change in basis of categorization, the types of researches vary. Same is the case with data. Same is the case with data. In data, we have if we divide the data on the basis of their nature of information sort, that is qualitative, that will be divided in two different categories, qualitative data and quantitative data. The purpose of saying this particular statement is that you might come up with different kind of categories offered by different authors. So they're also correct, but what we are discussing over here, we are categorizing those the types of data in two main heads. One of them is the qualitative and the other one is quantitative. The qualitative data, obviously based on the data other than numbers. It can either be the observation, it can either be the string data, it can either be the information, pictures, anything like that. They're further divided into two categories. The one is the nominal one and the other is the ordinal data. Nominal data defines different categories. For example, if you have yes, no kind of options, if I want to study the types of, like, different types of hairs in the market, the attributes, it also helps you understand, define attributes related to different things. Gender, obviously, like for example, attributes of hairs, attributes of people, and something like that. Like for example, we have different kind of hairs, like they're dry, oily, or normal. Or I can further categorize them and straight or curly or something like that. So nominal data help you identify the categories. In case of countries, nations, something like that. Ordinal data help you define the stages, the degree of stages. Like for example, if I want to study, if nominal data help you identify the dry hair and oily hair, ordinal might help you understand the level of dryness or level of oily, less dry, more dry, or something like that. Or it also help you gather the opinion of people, whether they are a kind of qualitative data that cannot be measured. But in order to measure that thing, we have to equally distribute in different intervals. So in case if we want to identify the opinion of people, one cannot say that I am, it's 56% agree or 60% agree. No, but on the basis of the scale from 0 to 100, we used to divide, or we used to place our agreement or opinion in these categories. It can either be 20%, 40%, and ordinal help you define those categories: strongly agree, strongly disagree, or no opinion, or less impact, from less to high, these kind of things. In case of quantitative data, obviously, now again, two categories. One is the discrete, that is the numbers, obviously, and one is the continuous data. Discrete data contains pure numbers, like that is 1, 2, 3, 4, or something like that. Whereas in case of continuous data, it contains the decimal points as well. Continuous data like help you, for example, if I want to study uh, the increasing temperature or blood pressures, or like anything that can be measured in decimal points. It can be 1.0000001 or 1 point. So these are the kind of continuous that is considered continuous, because it can either be, it can be further divided into so long decimal numbers. Whereas in case of discrete data are total whole numbers, 0, 1, 2, 3, and something like that, or either the negative ones as well. Again, uh, like as I've said earlier, there are different kind of people have defined the categories in different ways. So the qualitative, the quantitative, categorical, and numerical, and something like that. Now, again, this thing we have discussed earlier, what we said earlier, that in case of defining the wrong methodology, we might be getting the wrong results. So there are two kind of situations. In case if we have the screen shows a kind of matrix where when the situation is true, when the reality is true, and your research endorse the fact, that is the correct situation. Whereas in case your research, when the reality says that is true, but your research shows that no, that is not true, that is considered type 2 error. In case if the reality is totally opposite, however, your research, the measured or perceived results shows that no, the situation is real. In that case, that is false positive, and that is called type 1 error. Type 1 error, whereas in case of that is type 1 error, type 1 error is the one where the situation is false, but your research considered it true. That is type 1 error. That is considered false positive. For example, uh, a person was like a person thought that I might be having a heart attack. Although that was not true, it was his own assumption, but the results also suggested that, and the results were totally opposite. That was not a kind of heart attack. It might be a kind of any other problem, the gastrointestinal one or something like that. But still, the results said that okay, he might be having that kind of issue. In that case, that is a false positive, that type 1 error. In another case, the person was having the diabetes, but once the diabetes, but when he had the medical testing, in that case, the results said that no, he does not have any kind of problem in his sugar levels or something like that. There may be other factors that can affect the like accuracy of results based on the timing with where you have checked your sugar ratios and insulin levels, and it can either be the equipment that affect the accuracy of those results. In that case, that is considered false negative, and that is considered the type 2 error. The rest of the situation where if that is true and that was accepted true, that is correct. And in case if the reality, if that was false and it was considered accepted false, both these situations are correct. Both these situations are obviously correct. And in that case, you would be able to define the right methodology for that purpose. Now, Now, again, you can see on the screen that where the situation when that is considered alpha or beta. In case of false positive, that is considered type 1 error. In case of false negative, that is called type 2 error, and that is considered beta. The confidence, it also helps you understand the confidence level, the 95% or 5%. For example, if you ask the opinion of a surgeon, the chances of survival of a certain person, and he used to say the 95% chances or 5% chances or whatever. So that is the speculation. In that case, if that situation is true, what will be considered? In case that situation is false, how are you going to understand that thing? Now, another component in the research methodology is to identify the right population. Again and again, I'm mentioning again and again that population, the representatives, the sources from where you are going to gather your data, the objects of study, right? So in case if you're conducting the research on teenagers, on street crime rate, or on toddlers, or on kids, or old age people, are females or males or whatever, so you need to understand and identify your right population. And obviously, the sample is the representative of that population. Population can either be that obviously the nature of that population differs from field to field. In case obviously if I'm in business, and in case if I'm sending a shipment, and from the shipment I want to testify the like reliability of that shipment, the sample I'm going to draw, that will be different thing. And in that case, population will be different. It will not consist of humans. It will consist of the material or the material manufactured. So population varies from, a population is based on your research, what you are going to study. It can either be electronics, or it can either be humans, depending on your area of study, right? In case of medical researches, in case of scientific researches, in case of animal researches, all those populations differ. But the right population will help you identify the right sample. Sample is always drawn from the population, and sample help you identify the traits of population, help you identify the characteristics of population. And greater the sample size, greater will be the accuracy of your results, greater will be the identification of traits of your population. For example, as I've mentioned earlier, that in case if you want to check the reliability of a certain shipment, and you select the components randomly from there, and you check them out. So the pieces that you have checked, that will help you identify the accuracy or reliability or credibility or durability of certain components of that thing. In case if you're working studying the microorganisms, and in that case if you derive a sample from the whole population, greater the sample size, greater will be the accuracy of facts. Again, one more thing we need to understand, that how are we going to deduct that particular sample from the population? That is another important topic. As moving on towards the sampling process, the first step that comes is to define the universe, define the population. We are talking about universe or the population. Sample frame. Now, sample frame is another component. Sample frame help you identify the boundaries from where you are going to gather the data. In case if I'm going to gather the people, for example, if I want to study the higher education students, the behavior of higher education students, university level students, and I'm going to gather those students from random, from like phone directory or something like that, obviously that will not do. If I want to study the behavior of higher education students, university level students, it would be appropriate to gather the database from universities enrollment sections, and which particular universities you are going to include in your research. Obviously, we cannot study the whole population. We have to narrow down our scope in order to better gather the results, in order to better adjust the cost and everything. So sampling frame help you identify the right place to gather more and more of right people. In case, obviously, for example, if I will try to find the higher education institutions from ordinary normal population, I might get some different people, like from teenagers to kids to old age, so many other people. But obviously, in case if I'll move on towards if I will move on towards the database of a university, all those listed students will be the right ones, the appropriate ones. Same is the case with, in case if I want to study the behavior of teenagers or school level students, or employees in a bank, or if I want to study the behavior of criminals, obviously in that case, the behavior of criminals, in that case, the appropriate sampling frame will be to gather the names from FIRs or criminal database and all that. Now, the next thing is the specifying the sampling unit. Sampling units refers towards the actual data you are going to gather. Obviously, there are so many attributes that are associated with your population. It can either be their age, height, their behavior, their purchasing power, or in case if you have other attributes, if you are working with some other population as machinery or components, in that case, the reliability, durability, working efficiency, the cost, all these things are different traits. So sampling units refers towards the actual data to be measured. In case of humans, you have different set of different kind of sets, their age, their gender, their height, weight, whatever. So, or in case if you're going to work with the opinions and their behaviors or anything like that. So sampling unit specifically refers towards the data that you need to measure, that is needed to be measured. Selection of sample design, another component. Now, here comes the technical one. As we have discussed, have we established the fact earlier that population, you need to identify the population, and then you need to identify the right source from where you gather the sample size, the sample units. Sampling design refers towards gathering that particular sample in a technical way. And then comes the sample size, and finally the selection of sample. We are going to discuss in detail how to gather the samples design. What is sample design all about, and how are we going to gather that thing? Basically, the sample design or sampling method is divided into two categories. One is the probability sampling and other is the non-probability sampling. Probability sampling refers towards selecting a certain percentage of components from the overall population. One thing we need to understand very clearly, that this means that the population has a specific counting and number. we need to keep this thing in mind, right? The respondents we are going to gather, the area we are going to study, the sample we are going to derive, they are in specific numbers, they are countable, and they can be identified with the help of certain percentage. Whereas in case of non-probability sampling methods, as the name itself introduces, represents that they are not statistically derived. There are different methods to gather those things, gather that particular sample, but clear distinction should be made in your minds that in case of probability sampling, as we have mentioned earlier, that in case if you're going to select the wrong sampling method, if you're going to select the wrong population or the sample size, you are going to end up with wrong results. You are going to end up with either false positive, either false negative, the type 1 error or type 2 error. So that is very important thing. Probability sampling, whenever you're having such kind of respondents or such kind of population where their number is identified, where their total is identified, in that case, you're going to select the probability sampling. For example, I might not be able to identify the people living in the total number of people living in Pakistan, the total number, because of change in their birth and death every now and then. However, I cannot deny the fact that all the people, those are listed in NADRA, the database, CNIC database, that is countable. The students in university, that is countable. So the people that are enrolled or registered or they're recorded somewhere, in that case, you're going to use the probability sampling. Probability sampling can be further divided into simple random sampling, stratified, systematic, clustered, and non-probability, convenience, judgmental, and snowball. We can understand this particular phenomena with the help of these pictures. That is very good representation of the understanding these sampling methods. Simple random sample means if you have different kind of components in your population, for example, in population, in a class, if I want to make the CR or monitors, in case if I'm selecting at random without any distinction of male or female students, that will be considered the simple random sampling, right? In case in that case, I might end up with 2 females or 2 males or something like that, right? So in case if you used to gather the people from the total without any consideration or without any further division or bifurcation, that is considered the simple random sampling. If I want to select a team of 10 players from overall population, that will be considered simple random sampling. Systematic sampling, stratified sampling. In case of a stratified sampling, we use to make subdivisions. For example, as I mentioned earlier, if I want to select the monitors or CRs in the class, I divide the whole class in male and female students, and one from the male and one from the male is selected, another from the female is selected. In that case, that will be considered a stratified sampling. In case if I want to make a team of football players and I decide that, okay, I'm going to select 2 players, 2 or 3 or 4 players from every province. In that case, that will be considered the stratified sampling, right? You have make stratas, you have make groups, subgroups, and you are selecting the people from that. Systematic sampling is in that case where you used to order the people and you used a certain criteria. For example, if you're going to use the roll numbers 1, 3, 6, or something like that, any predefined criteria where you may end up with any kind of people, right? In that case, selection, usually the bulletins, usually balloting, so kind of things are done this way. People are selected in these ways. So systematic sampling is done this way. Cluster sampling is like kind of when you use, again, the same way in stratified sampling and in cluster sampling. In cluster sampling, you make random groups and you use to select the whole cluster rather than selecting certain percentage of different subgroups. You used to select complete groups as illustrated in the picture. For example, in an organization, for example, we have different branches of bank in a certain city, and we decided to conduct a workshop in 2 certain branches. So that will be considered the cluster. Or we decided to conduct the research in 2 certain branches. That will be considered the cluster sampling. Next is the non-probability one. Non-probability one also, it can be seen with the help of pictures. The convenience sampling, as the name implies, where you used to keep the researcher convenience at the forefront, right? And based on that convenience, whoever people are available. One thing, as we mentioned earlier, that in case of non-probability sampling, as you do not have the idea of true measurement of your population size, you used to like gather an appropriate sample size that truly reflects the attributes of the whole population. So in that case, greater the sample size, greater will be the accuracy of those results. However, we need to keep in mind that still in that case, either you have to justify the sample size with the help of statistical methods. There are other methods that are like introduced as well based on the number of variables, and there are so many things that helps you define the sample size as well. And or you can also identify the sample size based on other similar kind of researches that were conducted elsewhere. So you can also quote it that way, that also these kind of researches that were conducted in these areas of the world that also kept this particular sample size as an appropriate size for this research. So convenience sampling is that kind of sampling where you used to gather the respondents based on your convenience, based on the researcher convenience. Voluntary response sample, similar as one. In that case, you used to like spread your questionnaire, and you used to gather the response from all those people who are willing to respond. Like kind of mall intercept interviews, people used to give their opinion. There are 2 or more people are placed in certain malls, and they used to gather the opinion of different people, and obviously that is based on the willingness of respondents. Purposive sampling, that is a different one. In case of purposive sampling, you specifically identify those people that are more and more appropriate to your nature of research. For example, if you want to understand the effect of certain dilemma on a person, you are going to select the person based on his or her encounter with that particular dilemma. Obviously, the people cannot be selected at random for that purpose, and you need to make sure that the respondents are truly representative of that particular data. In case of a snowball is kind of chain kind of link, chain kind of sampling. In a snowball, you used to approach 2 or 3 person, and you always make a condition, make it a condition that they are going to refer you to further 3. So this way you would be able to gather so many people and so many respondents that way. So that was one of the another factors, the probability and non-probability sampling, and the right method for the probability and non-probability sampling. Again and again, I'm saying this thing, that the method is selected on the basis of your nature of research, what you are going to do with the research data. Sample size, we have discussed that is the subpopulation to be studied in order to make an inference to a reference population, a broader population to which the findings from a study to be generalized. Another thing, synopsis from it. Okay, so again, getting back to the sampling procedure, that helps you understand that what are the components we have to define in our research methodology. After the declaration of your hypothesis statement, you need to come up with all those factors we have studied right now, including the variables, the types of variables, and the variables you're going to use, obviously based on your sampling unit. Sampling units refer to the data, and that also help you define the types of your variables and types of data as well, the way to gather that particular data as well. Then comes the sampling design, sampling method you are going to use, and the sample size that is more appropriate to your research. All these things need to be clearly defined in your research. Another thing, obviously, that is the part of your research, is how are you going to gather that data. In the previous slides, we have also discussed that in case if you're conducting a qualitative research, it is based on in-depth interviews, surveys, observations. Observations are some other kind, some high-level studies. But in case of conducting interviews, or in case of conducting surveys with the help of questionnaire interviews and observation, they are the main components of gathering primary data and qualitative kind of data as well. Interviews can be further divided into 2 categories. One is the structured interview and other is the unstructured interview. Structured interview refers towards those kind of interviews. Structured interviews are those kind of interviews where you prior define your questions and you try to gather the answer of those questions from your respondent. Whereas in case of unstructured one, you initiate a conversation, you initiate a discussion, and the questions that followed, they are the spontaneous one that are based on the flow of your conversation. In case of semi-structured interviews, you need to, that is a combination of both these. In that case, you try to, obviously, based on the data you're going to gather, you define the questions, but you keep yourself open to further new information with the help of spontaneous questions that may come up with the flow of communication, the conversation. In case of the questionnaires, in that case, the questionnaires are again categorized in two different categories: open-ended and close-ended questionnaires. Close-ended questionnaires are those kind of questionnaires where you used to have certain options available in the questionnaire. Certain options available in the questionnaire means either yes, either no, either the categories, whatever, strongly agree to strongly disagree on certain categories, the degrees, education, gender, whatever. So open-ended questionnaire refer towards those type of questionnaire where you are given the liberty to mention any kind of thing, although they are very obviously they are difficult to analyze, they are difficult to analyze, and obviously the result interpretations are also very much difficult. Same is the case with obviously interviews. Interviews are not usually conducted with high population or high sample size. Keep this thing in mind. The selection of these tools are also based on the nature, the sample size, and nature of your research. In case if you have higher population and higher sample size, it's not recommended to conduct the interviews because obviously it's too expensive process. That is more appropriate to gather the responses via quizzes or via questionnaires. Questionnaires, we have discussed that questionnaires have two categories, actually three: open-ended, close-ended, and again semi open or close-ended. The type of questionnaire where you used to provide a specific options. However, you also provide an option. You also provide further addition to those options as well. So these are the components of research that clearly have to be defined. They have to be defined very clearly and they have to be mentioned very clearly. Research methodology should also include the design of your tool, research tool, the data gathering tool, either that is interview or either that is a questionnaire. In case if you're going towards the contemporary approaches like focus groups or observation kind of research, that are obviously discussed and explained in a different way. So that was all about the that was all about your research methodology. So hope you all have got the right idea of your research methodology, and you would be able to define it in a proper way. That's all for today, and inshallah we'll get back with another lecture very soon. Take care. Allah Hafiz.